Folks, we're still in quarantine, but weekly webinar is back, answering your questions, however dirty and infectious they are. Dr. Mike, how's it going?
And they are both. And viral, I might add.
Ooh.
Let's get to it.
Yes.
Okie dokie. Luis Garza says, "Que onda, Dr. James and Dr. Mike?" I'm saying I don't speak Spanish, but I feel like that means what up.
I don't speak Spanish either, but yeah.
All right. He says,
we speak American around here, boy.
I'd like to know your thoughts on unilateral training. How should we train the weak side in general? Because in my years of working out, I'll do one arm exercise with my weaker left side first, perform them to failure, note down the amount of reps. Do the same amount of reps on my stronger right side. This would leave my strong side 2 RIR in most cases. However, I've now read that 1 to 3 RIR are better for strength and hypertrophy, which leads me to believe that my right side grew and got stronger relatively faster than my left side, scientifically speaking. Now, if I stay 1 to 3 RIR on my left side and perform the same amount of reps on my right side would be around 5 to 6 RIR, assumingly. Would this be a better approach? Hopefully this makes sense. But if not, then I'll try to be more clear next time. It makes a lot of sense, and I think you're on the right track. The other question is it worth doing any of this? And that's maybe for another time for us to answer. I posted a video today on my Instagram of me doing upright rows, and my right shoulder just hangs lower than my left. It's been a thing that I was able to observe since I was 11. So it's just design, just straight up genetics and epigenetics, the way it came out. So basically, what am I doing about it? Not shit, because it's there's so many, everyone has so many different little imbalances. Fundamentally, and I did a lecture on this a while back. I believe it's on RP Plus, and if it's not, then it's on regular YouTube. But the lecture is how to bring up asymmetries in weak muscle groups, and really is the fastest way to do it is put whatever you want to take a back seat, you put that on maintenance volume or minimum effective volume, and no higher. And then you put the other thing between MEV and MRV until it catches up. And then you start to thread in the training of the other one that wasn't, and sort of see if they go, they can keep going side by side. But sometimes I would recommend, that's fine to do. I would recommend not taking that too far and trying to balance everything out too much, because then you just become sort of preoccupied with balancing and not so much to develop everything. If I was worried about balance on my right and left, I'd have trained really, really weird, and my arms wouldn't have doubled in size over the last 5 years. So I would say just get really, really jacked, and then when you start competing in bodybuilding and or you're at your peak, then you can start to de-emphasize one thing and emphasize another. And another thing is this, there's actually a really good reason to de-emphasize the thing you don't want to be as big instead of emphasizing the thing you want to be the biggest. Let's say your left tricep is bigger than your right. There's no way your right is ever going to catch up to your left, because for whatever reason, your left is just bigger. And it could be fiber type, it could be muscle cell number, it could be some other reason. And as long as those reasons are there, they probably are, they're probably not getting rid of those reasons, then the left is always going to be bigger than the right. So you almost by definition have to de-emphasize the left in order to ever get the right to catch up. Because if you take the logic out too far, be like, okay, I just got to get my right to catch up. Like, okay, and then your left goes again, it gets bigger. Like, then I get my right to catch up. Like, then you just infinitely sized at some point. Like, whatever the ceiling is, it's probably going to be that the ceiling for the better body part is higher than the ceiling for the worse one. So at some point, just backing off on the one that is bigger is probably the best solution, rather than accelerating training on the one that is smaller, if you really, really think it through. And it sounds unfortunate, and it is, so don't do it until you're really, really jacked and you're okay. Once you're okay with the size of your weaker muscle group, then it's time to pare down the stronger one. That's what I would say. James?
Yeah, that's sound advice, and I wish I could talk to my younger self, because I had this problem forever, because I had my ACL reconstructed from rugby, and then I had one buff leg and one tiny leg for quite a long time, and I did all sorts of stupid stuff. One of the things that I think, kind of just piggybacking off of what Mike said, a lot of times you can get stuck in this symmetry battle where you're spending a lot of time just doing a bunch of nonsense unilateral exercises, where in the reality is it's both sides are going to get, in the triceps example, what Mike was using earlier, both sides are going to get plenty of stimulation doing something like a bench press or, close grip bench press or something like that. So it's probably in your best interest to just use the same good compound movements, unless it's something where the bar is totally cockeyed when you're bench pressing, which would be a clinical level imbalance at that point, right? But if you just have one that's a little stronger than the other, stick with those good compound movements and then save a little bit of your volume landmarks resources to add some, unilateral stuff on your other side if it needs a little bit more. So at that point, you might be hitting like an MEV stimulus on your strong side and more like an MAV, MRV stimulus on your weak side. So do your normal stuff, leave a little bit of room in the tank, and you can add some direct work, unilateral work if you want to on your lagging side. I think that's also a very reasonable approach. What I wouldn't do is completely ignore it if it's bad. Like just say, okay, well, I'm just going to do as much bench press as I can. Fuck it. Right. Because then it's just going to, it'll slowly kind of even out, but you'll still always be a little bit asymmetrical over time. And I think also the other side where you're just like, okay, well, I'm only going to do one arm stuff for every movement of every exercise is also not the way to go. So somewhere in the middle is probably the sweet spot.
Yep. Very, very great insight. James West says, hi guys, whenever I back squat,
what a boring name.
Yeah, really. Wally West. I get really severe DOMs in my adductors, or at least that area of my leg. I have reduced the volume significantly and still seem to get the same problem. I realize you can't diagnose this from a question, but is there a process to try to work out why this is happening? E.g. weak versus overactive adductors, glutes, or something completely different? So the overactive thing, that's actually a myth. There's no such thing as an overactive muscle. Or underactive if a neurologist says you're not dying.
I straight up have this problem every time I switch back to high bar squats. I think I even made a joke about it a couple weeks ago. You know what it is that your high bar squats, like we usually think of it as like this really quad dominant exercise, but it hits those adductors like a motherfucker. And
there's nothing wrong with that either.
There's nothing wrong with that. Whereas something like, for me, cambered bar squats do not really hit my adductors. Close stance high bar squats do not really hit my adductors. So really what you just have is a muscle that is, for a lack of a better word, deconditioned to training stimuli. And then you open up a movement, which you think is mostly going to be on your quads, and ends up being on your quads and this other muscle that hasn't really been trained very much, at least directly. And you just immediately exceed the capacity at which you can tolerate. And that's something that I've kind of struggled with too. So if you have been doing other squat variations and then you switch back to high bar squats and you notice that you're having limitations on your adductors, it means you have to start much lower than whatever you are currently doing. So that might mean just doing like 1 or 2 sets the first time you add it back.
Yep. And also as far as diagnosing, you may just want to retool your squat technique to place less stress on adductors and place more on quads, and that's going to be a foot position situation and a foot toe angle, so you can put your feet a little bit more straight, get your feet closer together, and it'll probably hit the adductors less usually. But what you basically can do is try different squat techniques that you think would hit the adductors less, see if they cause the same amount of soreness, and if they cause less, you're onto something, and then you can do more of them and less of regular squatting if you really think that that's a limiting factor. In addition to that, some people just get a lot out of squatting for a lot of the adductors. I sure do, which is why my supplementary volume, sometimes done before squatting even, comes from things like leg presses or from things like hack squats, in which I can take an artificially close stance and not really involve my adductors as much. So that's something to think about. Don't just think, high bar squats, like James says, equal quads. They equal quads and adductors and a bunch of other stuff. But there's those overactive adductors. Like, what are you going to do? You take a fucking neural silencing drug locally delivered? But that's not a thing. It all comes down to technique and mind muscle connection. So if you change the technique, you especially with foot positioning, usually that gets rid of most of the problem. And sometimes other exercises might be a good idea as well. Yeah,
don't overdiagnose it. It's just the same thing as if you didn't bench press for 3 months and then you went back to bench pressing, you're like, oh, what's wrong with my pecs? Or is it my back muscles? It's like, no, your pecs just aren't used to bench pressing, right?
Overactive pecs. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Khalid B says, hi, docs. I have 2 questions for you this week. Number 1, I finished my metabolite phase and I hopped straight into basic hypertrophy meso. Interesting. Prior to metabolite, I did 2 hypertrophy mesos, but I took a 2-week break and was only doing bodyweight stuff prior to my metabolite phase as I was waiting for equipment, so I figured resensitization phase is not needed. Compared to the metabolite phase, the reps in this hypertrophy phase are lower. I also started at about the same number of sets. If total volume in this meso is lower than the metabolite phase, starting set number, lower reps, lower ending sets at the last week, not reaching MRV. Does that mean I'm not presenting an overload, or will I still grow, but perhaps not as much as a metabolite phase? So you absolutely presenting an overload if you're challenging the system. So if the workouts are remotely challenging, they're presenting an overload, so that's easy. Remember, overload is not an absolute thing. It's a relative thing. It's a range. If total volume of this meso was lower, et cetera, that actually doesn't, it's all autoregulatory. Like if you feel it, if you're getting like mega fucking sore and you're barely recovering session to session, you're getting all the volume you need. And because you're back to assume traditional hypertrophy range because you got really good equipment, you might not need as much volume. So I wouldn't really compare at-home metabolite training or just metabolite training at all on set numbers, rep numbers, and all this other stuff, I would just compare it on total magnitude of stimulus as perceived by essentially, if you go to RP Plus, or you are in RP Plus, there's a lecture I just did that's been posted a while back, like basically proxying the stimulus and stimulus to fatigue ratio. If the stimulus is proxied is very high, there's tons of mind-muscle connection, tons of tension, you get very, very messed up from training, and there's a big pump, then I wouldn't worry about it and just do it. And it's going to get you great results. And comparing what's better, metabolite phase or not, is I think something that we can't even really speculate about, James.
Yeah, it's really one of those apples to oranges kind of things, because it's like you look at what you're doing for 30 reps with a janky at-home metabolite workout versus like doing something like with a barbell. The intensity is so much higher. So per rep, like the stimulus is going to be much more massive, let alone even considering SFR stuff. Like you're just going to get a huge magnitude difference from whatever you're doing. And they just don't add up very well because like the style, like doing the short rest and the super high reps, it's not a tit for tat kind of thing. It's the same general goal, but it really is done about in such a different way. It's hard to compare. So I would just treat them as completely different mesocycles and go back to some of the old mesocycles you did that were more similar to the one that you're doing now and look at those as a reference point rather than the metabolite phase that you just did. I will say, and I think Mike and I are probably on the same confused point as to why you went back to a regular hypertrophy meso after the metabolite meso. We usually would say...
He said he thought the active rest before the metabolite meso was good enough, but we really do usually say after a metabolite, it's time to take active rest. Not before. And if you did take one before, take another one after. Take maybe just a week or something.
Exactly. So I think in the future, what might be a better course of action if you're in a similar spot would have been you take the active rest, then start a basic hypertrophy, and then go into a metabolite. That would have make more sense to me. I think what you're doing is okay, but I think this meso is probably going to be, I don't want to say a wash, but it's not going to be the greatest meso you ever had. I think that's fair to say.
Totally. Number 2, I'd really appreciate your input into my current situation. When I was a teen, I was chubby, 6 feet, 220, and I dropped weight fast, eating 1,500 calories, no weight training. The result dropped me to 150 pounds, but still appearing fat without clothes, skinny fat, probably 25% body fat. Now I lifted for 3 years, but first 2 were inconsistent, not optimal. I started weightlifting with a personal trainer who was a drugged-out amateur bodybuilder. I was doing crazy high volume as a beginner on a 3-time-a-week bro split, eating each muscle group once. Good God. I would also go to failure all the time and use intensity techniques and never progress session to session. Good God. I recut my body in these 3 years, not 165, probably 15%, but strength is still lacking. In the last 5 months, I'm training smarter, using an RP, but I still feel like I'm not progressing my strength really. I progressed a mesocycle because I hold back and go to 3 RIR, 2 RIR, 1 RIR, etc. But after deload, I may gain 2 or 3 reps on some muscle groups, but 0 or maybe 1 for chest. My volume today at a regulated based on soreness and performance is pretty much similar to what it was when I started with a crazy amount of volume. So I have 2 theories. Maybe there is truth to building a strength-based thing, especially for natural athletes. There's probably no truth to that. We'll get back to that.
If your goal is to be stronger, then maybe, but
yeah.
If for hypertrophy, no, not as much.
Yeah. I was constantly doing high reps with high volume, and maybe that style of training does not lend itself to strength. Maybe. We'll get to that in a sec. I asked because even the personal trainer, despite his size, probably 220 to 5'8", was still relatively weak for his size. His max bench was 230 to 250. That's actually very weak, and I know lots of people who trained only like this for years and got really, really strong. So it's almost certainly genetics is why he's that weak. The other theory, hypothesis, not theory. Sorry, we're here to educate. That really is what you mean. Is that due to all this volume as a beginner, my MRV has skyrocketed and need more sets to see some size and strength. Nope, that's also not how it works. I'm not sure what to do. Option 1, build a strength base and go on a powerlifting program after this meso. Option 2, keep pushing volume higher and see where it takes me. Even doing 25 sets of chest per week, for instance, I can come back next week. And last week I did dumbbells for 50s and 12 reps, 0. As an example, I can usually match it but not really progress it. Option 3 would be to go on a test cycle with crazy volume and forget the scientific concepts. Well, you can go on a test cycle with scientific concepts. That's
I read that and I was like, does he mean like a trial, cycle, or does he mean a testosterone cycle?
All joking aside, I did go on a 4-month TRT dose of tests last year when my training wasn't optimal, encouraged by the personal trainer. Good God, the guy's a piece of shit. Punch him in the face for him. It was low frequency, super high volume to failure, and I gained about 10 pounds. Weight stayed the same since I was cutting, but dropped 10 pounds of fat. But did not particularly notice strength progress, just better work capacity. I'm pretty much training the same now, but with more frequency and structure progression, but the difference is night and day. It makes me really wonder whether there isn't, in fact, a difference in how drug-free and enhanced athletes should train. No, because you would have had amazing results if you trained well and took tests. But in any case, Lost it all once I stopped. Yeah, makes sense. I'm also not going that road again because I noticed a bit of hair loss and acne as well as anxiety despite the low dose.
Sure.
And in my vanity pyramid, my face and hair are more important than gaining some size. So generally speaking, there's, I think, sort of two options here. One is you can try a much lower volume plan with still very good frequency and everything like that, like a very strength biased, lower rep biased hypertrophy plan, lower volume, stay basically at MEV, and see maybe if you can get better gains. Some people just, their recovery is really limited, and some people, even a moderate volume training sort of impedes on their recovery so much, or impedes, on their adaptive resources so much that they really just get the best adaptation at a lower end of recovery. I think there are genetic differences there where some people get their best results when they're pushing it really close to the limits. Some people get their best results when they're staying away, most people somewhere in between. So there is a chance that, even training between MEV and MRV, like closer to MRV, may not be productive for you. So you can hang around MEV for a while and progress in load more than you progress in volume and see if that actually improves your muscularity and also gives you more strength. It could improve your strength significantly, but you won't feel any bigger, and then you're back to square one. But it might work. That's option one. Option two is that, sort of genetically, you're as big and as strong, or the progression of your size and strength is what it is. And short of changing into powerlifting style training to get stronger, which probably won't make you bigger, there's really not much to do about it, but just do your best within the confines of current hypertrophy approach. Those would be my two options.
Yeah, and I think I feel like we kind of get an iteration of the same question week to week, and so I'm just going to reiterate the same point that we usually make: is are you training for hypertrophy or are you training for strength? What is your ultimate goal here? It sounds like you're doing a lot of hypertrophy training and then kind of just not happy with your strength progress, right? So if that's the issue, what would be in your best interest is to just do like 3 strength blocks after you're done with your hypertrophy phase. And then it will allow you to manifest all of that strength that you have been accruing through more muscle mass over time. Remember, strength is contextual. It's a skill. It's like anything else. You have to actually practice the movements in order to get really, really good at them. And sometimes that means you have to increase the intensity and drop the volume quite a bit to express that level of preparedness that you have been building and building and building over time. So if you're concerned that you're not getting stronger and that somehow is a bad reflection on your programming, the best way to figure that out is like, all right, do a block of 6, a block of 4, a block of 2s and 3s, see where you end up. And if you can say, okay, I definitely got stronger, which almost certainly you will, you got nothing to worry about. But at the same time, also reconsider, like, why are you actually training?
Right.
If you're training for hypertrophy, then this is all a moot point. You don't really have to worry about this. The strength is a bonus to good programming. Like,
two things. The reason James and I are really sort of dead set on making sure you understand this dichotomy is that, for every, in many situations, there's a sort of cohort of people that have the same kind of experience and the same problem. And they go, well, isn't this a solution? And what is often not considered by people who haven't thought this through, and I'm sure you've thought it through a while, but because we're sort of like a little bit ahead because we do this for a living, is there's another cohort of people on the opposite end that will complain about the opposite thing if you do it. So for example, if you serve, steak and eggs at a restaurant, there's going to be people that are like, there's definitely not enough steak here and too many eggs. But if you change it to their preferences, guaranteed some customers will be like, dude, this is way too much steak, or is it, way too many eggs, not enough steak. It's going to go the other way. So the other way on this is, if we told you, listen, you're probably going to get great results if you do sets of 6 and 8, relatively low volume, and really emphasize strength progress, to every person that we told that to, maybe 3 out of those 10 people would come back and be like, I've gotten a lot stronger, but I haven't gotten any bigger. What the fuck? And we'd be like,
yes.
Well, actually, this is not remotely designed to make you bigger, so it's no surprise. And maybe 6 or 7 out of 10 people, right? Now, are there going to be 2 or 3 out of 10 people that are like, wow, this actually made me a lot bigger? Sure, that's very possible, which is why I said you might want to explore that sort of lower volume, more load progressive form of hypertrophy training. That's totally fine. I just wouldn't expect these huge results or huge rainbows. Also, there's some of the stuff like, the difference between natty training and enhanced training and stuff, and like the natties need a strength base and strength progression. That's like straight out of Lyle McDonald's book. He just made that up. He literally whole cloth just made up the fact that enhanced can grow from volume, but naturals only grow from strength progression. That's so strange because Ronnie Coleman was like basically the strongest bodybuilder on the planet, was also the biggest, and he used drugs. Somebody should have told him that didn't work. And all the way down the line, fundamentally, people with good strength genetics can train with really high volumes and get super fucking strong anyway. There's guys in the IFBB that never do sets of 2 or 3. They bench 405 on the incline for sets of 15. How the fuck did that happen? Did they ever build a strength base? No, they started with bro training. They kept bro training. They started taking drugs the entire time. They just fucking got stronger and stronger and stronger. Some people get really, really strong, but don't add a lot of size. what's his name? The Captain America guy on Instagram.
Oh,
No.
Eric Helms.
No. Also, yeah.
Damn it!
So,
who are you talking about?
Yeah, he's I forgot. God damn it! I shouldn't forget his name. He was one of the best lifters in the world. He's like a 181 lifter, and he legitimately looks like he doesn't fucking train. Like he is, he literally is out totaled everyone at 181, like all time world record. And I believe he just got on drugs and he's taken like minimal amounts or something, or like he was drug free for forever and it was still out totaling everyone. He legitimately just looks like he doesn't fucking lift weights. You're like, what the fuck? Like, imagine his frustration if he was like, man, I keep training and I just can't gain size, but I'm the strongest person ever. Like, what are you supposed to tell him? Like, there's only so much that'll affect. And then you got like, other guys that will train for powerlifting and I know guys like this, they'll never really get impressively strong. They're fucking jacked out of their minds. And you're just like, look, man, that's the cards you were dealt. Sometimes you don't really choose that outside of the basic generalities that James and I will tell you. Like, if you want strength, train for strength training. If you want size, train for size training. Outside of like that, after the cards fall where they may, man, a lot of that's not really up to us. I actually transitioned to bodybuilding for a number of reasons, mostly because I was more passionate about it. But for my muscle size, I was never a very impressive powerlifter, not nearly. But like for how not strong I am, I'm fucking really, really jacked. Like I have a bigger chest than a bunch of guys who bench over 500 pounds, and I've never benched over 500 pounds. How the fuck does that work? So it's definitely something that a lot of times just comes down to genetics, and you just got to let it do what it does.
Yeah, totally agree. So just don't get too caught up on this like strength stuff, my friend. It seems like it's holding you back from maybe just really giving it your best effort.
For sure. All right, Kartik Singh asks, does heavy squat and deadlift increase our waist size? Probably my best guess is it does to some extent. Probably not by increasing organ size or intra-abdominal fat size. But increasing the thickness of all of the muscles around there. Probably not a ton, but some extent. In natural athletes who are not using growth hormone, insulin, and a shitload of orals at the same time, I wouldn't expect really giant changes. I wouldn't worry about it. That's really how you grow your waist. And when you're lean, your waist is going to be very small. Anyway, by the time that James took his super cool RP transformation pictures when he was super fucking lean, he was deadlifting 550 for reps and squatting 400 for reps, and his waist was fucking teeny tiny. You can look at those pictures on RP actually. James's waist was like small to the extent it was like, why nonsense? Like, would you have like under 30-inch waist or something? It had to be close to 30.
I don't remember. I think it
like disappeared.
Normally I hang out around 34, 36, and then during that period, it was gone. Yeah.
And you do put a lot of fat around your waist too. And it's just like when you got lean enough, all that squats and deadlifts didn't give you a big waist. So in natural folks, even in drug using folks that don't use a shitload of insulin and growth and orals, especially just high doses of anabolics, waist size just really just has almost nothing to. One person you can look up is really concerned, Johnny Jackson. Johnny Jackson is an IFBB pro bodybuilder. He had a very awesome fucking streamlined waist, and he has deadlifted over 800 for reps, and his erectors are just bigger than his erectors and traps together just make no sense. They don't register. But his actual waist is fairly small, and he's been under loads nobody else can fucking tolerate. Ronnie Coleman had a very small waist relative to his size and was squatting and deadlifting over 800 pounds. The way he got a bigger waist was, farming, pharmaceutical use, is all to fucking shit, and just getting really, really big. So I would say it's definitely a thing, but it's almost not a real world concern. Jared Feather has squatted hundreds of pounds, deadlifted. Jared's deadlifted over 6, squatted over 5. And his waist is like 27 inches in contest shape. So here's another thing. It hasn't gotten bigger over the years in any visible way as his strength has multiplied. So I wouldn't worry about it too much, James.
Yeah, so like kind of the TLDR version is like those things can kind of increase front to back thickness just because your front abdominal muscles and your erector muscles will grow. But once you're kind of intermediate, it's not going to really be a thing anymore. And frankly, like it would be a huge mistake to exclude those movements purely for the sake of avoiding growing your waist size, because they're so stimulative for a variety of different muscles and for your legs especially, like Jesus Christ. So I think that would be a big mistake. Definitely don't take them out if you're worried about waist size, because like Mike said, it's not a huge deal.
100%. All right, Sam Schneider says, Docs, a few quick questions. Would endurance training benefit from a similar resensitization phase that are often implemented in hypertrophy training? An endurance phase of this sort might have a substantial amount of high effort work with decreased volume. Any merit to this, or am I just not making sense? So it actually works the opposite way in endurance training, where having a work capacity phase Also peppered with a lot of what is called stupidly LSD, long, slow distance. Long and distance actually accomplish the same. The moniker's fucking. They just wanted to say LSD. So just a very high distance, low pace effort. Endurance periodization works fundamentally like this. Phase one is a lot of long distances without a lot of rapid paces. But all three of these training types mix in. But this one, first phase is dominated by them. The second phase is dominated by a lot of repeat interval work. So you basically like get really close or past your lactate threshold, back off. Past your lactate threshold, back off. Past your lactate threshold, awful, terrible, terrible stuff. But you also do a little bit of base building or work capacity work, long, slow distance work, and you start to do a little bit of competition pace work during that time. And the last phase, the pre-competitive phase, is where you do still two of those other things, but very little long, slow distance, quite a bit, but not as much of the interval work, and you do a ton of more and more competition pace work where you replicate competition conditions, competition body weight, and start to get close to competition paces, sometimes over speed, sometimes under speed, longer distance, so on and so forth. So that is the model. And then after that, you take an active rest phase, which endurance training can sometimes be quite lengthy, where what you end up doing is you do a lot less work over the period of 2 to 4 weeks, because endurance training fucks you up, like especially running fucks you, like it fucks your joints and bones up. You got to take some time away from that shit at a high competitive level. And two, what you can do is actually just continue to exert yourself in slightly different ways. So for example, if you're a swimmer, you do a little bit of running work and cycling work. If you're a cyclist, you do a bit of swimming and a bit of running. If you're a triathlete, I'd fuck if I know what you do. If you're a triathlete, you probably just take the traditional active rest where you just stay the fuck away from all kinds of other hard training. Maybe you go on the elliptical or something like that, something that's not a competitive swimmer. Maybe you do some rowing, right? There you go. That keeps your central abilities up while reducing the stress on your periphery. And then after that active rest phase, you go back into building a work capacity. So basically, this is kind of interesting, because the way mTOR and AMPK work, as you train with higher volumes, you get more hypertrophy, but mTOR activity starts to fall, so you need to resensitize. There's actually, the cool thing about endurance training is humans are a lot more designed for endurance training than they are for strength training. As you do more endurance training, your AMPK goes up. It actually just makes you better at doing more endurance training and benefiting from more endurance training. The only thing that stops you is a crazy amount of fatigue, and then you have to recycle to get rid of the fatigue and then work your way back in. So there's actually no need for a true resensitization phase in endurance training, but there is a huge need, bigger need, for something like an active recovery phase to get rid of tons of fatigue. James?
So I'm going to go a slightly different route. I do think there is some merit to resensitization phase because, endurance training operates under similar mechanisms. I mean, we're still stimulating protein synthesis for mitochondrial biogenesis. And so there does seem to be some limits in terms of some of those big cellular regulators like mTOR and AMPK. They do seem to kind of peak out at some point. And we see this more prolifically with strength training. And then things like mRNA expression seems to kind of take over. And this is something that Doc Stone was really, really big on and talked to us about. So from that perspective, I think that there is some benefit there from doing resensitization for endurance training. The time scale, however, for that to occur at the muscle level is much smaller. And then the bigger issue, and this is where I totally agree with Mike, is the fatigue management side of like joint stress, wear and tear. And that's what just tends to take more time. So yeah, I think there
is covered by active rest, that small time scale. So the active
exactly. So active rest hits both for the most part. So there is some, I think, some merit there for taking some time off of endurance training, but practically speaking, it's all covered by active rest. So
yeah, very good point, James. Thanks for pointing that out. And also, because endurance training is so heavily work capacity limited, after a resensitization phase for muscle growth, a lot of times right after you get your best gains in muscle growth, after resensitization for endurance training, it takes you a while to get back to making great gains in endurance because you have to rebuild all those mechanisms.
Yeah. So for the most part, it's the cool thing about doing endurance training, as Mike already pointed out, is it kind of feeds itself. You just the more you do it, the better you keep getting, right? And so there's outside of your recovery ability limitations. So it's one of those kind of interesting
ones. Is actually interesting, James, now that we're on the subject. The more consistent you are, the better you get. But at the same time, it also endurance involution occurs much faster. So the recession of gains occurs much faster,
yes.
Which actually like really rewards overdoing it for endurance folks. Cause like if you're lazy in strength training, a lot of times periods of laziness just potentiate the living fuck out of you, drop a ton of fatigue, and you get even better results. Like sometimes the hardest working bodybuilders don't get much better because they overdo it. It's so easy to overdo. you know, like so it's difficult to overdo, but overdoing it is really bad. With endurance folks, I think underdoing it is a lot of times way worse. So there's this bias to be like, man, last time I took 2 days off, I felt fucking terrible. I'm never doing that again. And then all of a sudden, you know, there's this level of like incredibly high adaptation and fatigue that people sustain for a long time, which is like, not only am I now in good enough shape to really fuck myself up, I'm just always fucked up. And it's really tough to get endurance athletes sometimes to back away from training to really heal that fatigue. The best are really good at it, and they know what they're doing. Another thing is endurance runners are actually statistically smarter than people who weight train. Like literally, they just score higher in the IQ distribution for whatever reason. There's no cause and effect there. There's meatheads are fucking dumb to begin with, and like, oh, this is great on average, of course. But a lot of endurance folks really buy into periodization paradigms, which work. They're almost universally accepted in endurance training. Like in endurance training, you don't just go and start running. Anyone who's serious about endurance training is like, so who's your coach? Where's your plan? And you're like, what plan? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? In bodybuilding, you just get jacked just doing shit yourself. In endurance, that shit does not fly anymore. So endurance folks, a lot of times, they will take active rest just because they know they have to. And that like, oh, but I really wanna, is tempered by a bigger culture in endurance training of like, do what the fuck the program says because you're not that smart. So.
Yeah, there's some really interesting stuff on the tapering literature too, because with tapering for strength sports, you see a lot of really crazy stuff occurring at the muscular level where like they can look at muscle cells and they'll show like force and power output, even velocity will go up, which is great for if you want to be a rugby player or soccer player. It gives you a big incentive, and you see bigger shifts towards type 2X muscle fiber distribution stuff, a lot of cool stuff. For endurance sport, you really don't see a ton of muscular stuff, but you see a ton of central stuff where you just see like massive improvements in some of their blood markers. Their like VO2 max can sometimes go up. Heart rate is hit or miss depending on how they did the study. So you see like a really cool dichotomy where like at the muscular level, not much going on in the taper for endurance training, but at the central level, like you see some massive changes.
Yeah, very cool. Next question from Sam Schneider is... I'm coming back from a broken fibula. Holy shit.
Oh.
And recently started leg training again. My left quad is significantly atrophied, and I can achieve DOMs with only a few sets. Kept very far away from 4 RIR. I want to make sure my thought process here is correct. My quads MAV is reduced due to detraining, thus explaining how low the low volume. Yep. Mm-hmm. Sets taken much short of failure have been known to elicit large hypertrophic adaptations on trained individuals. Correct. Essentially, my quad is what my quad is right now. True. I'm also assuming that because of the current state of my quad, I can continue to progress with sets kept far away from failure, but still progressively more difficult. I don't want to push too hard too soon. Yes, absolutely.
Nailed it.
Actually, just kidding, Sam. What you should do is just assume your quad's 100%. Just
train it like the other one.
20 sets a session. Yeah, and if it can't lift the weight the other one can, you got to nut up. Just try harder, bro. No, you're on 100% the right track. And James and I like are perennially just unbelievably frustrated by this. Folks, when you are detrained and you're coming back, you're getting the easiest fucking gains of your life. Just shut up and take the fucking easy gains. Like, oh, I'm getting sore at 4IR. What does this mean? It means you're getting fucking gains at 4IR. Who needs to go to failure? You don't have to do it. Here's when you want to go to failure. When you've done like 16 sets of 2IR and you don't feel a fucking thing the next day. Now it's time to push really hard. Okay, but you don't have to do that yet.
And that's not where you want to be either. That's not the position you want to find yourself in.
Yeah, people are like, I want to be advanced. Steve Hall is a great talk.
No.
Like, you don't want to be advanced. Trust me.
Dude, I was adding up my numbers because I just wrapped up my arm mass phase, and I was looking at my total like arm and shoulder numbers, and I was just like, fuck me. I do 40 sets of arms and shoulders every day. It blows.
Yeah, it takes a lot to progress when you're getting better.
It's like, what am I doing today? Ooh, about 30 sets of curls? All right, get to it.
You live in a James, shut up. You live in a bro's miracle life.
It took me a long time to get to the bro party, but I'm loving it. Loving it.
And he says, James, I very much enjoyed the applied periodization video so far. Thank you. James, I've heard from other people that very, very good reviews of those videos.
Thanks. You know, it's funny. Those are old videos. I mean, we recorded those, feels like 4 years ago or something, and we finally moved them
just leaking onto YouTube.
Yeah, so it's funny. I saw some. I was like, "What videos?" And I was like, "Oh, those ones." Yeah, all right.
Yeah. Cool. And then he says, Mike, I like critical thinking. What is it good for? There's an article I recommended. So if you type in critical thinking, what is it good for? In fact, what is it? You'll read what I consider the single greatest article on the internet. Enjoy. And he says, I've also found Thomas Sowell and Stephen Pinker to be interesting individuals. Very cool. Me too. I'm sure you've probably read it, but on the off chance you haven't, Friedrich Hayek wrote an article, The Use of Knowledge in Society in 1945. I really enjoyed reading it and would recommend it to anyone. From what I've heard, that's a great article. I haven't read it, but I have read Thomas Sowell's book, Knowledge and Decisions 3 times, and I understood about 2/3 of it. It's an incredible book that's essentially sort of dovetailed off of that article, but Thomas Sowell basically does like 400 pages of the most intense thinking you ever seen. If you ever think you're smart, read Knowledge and Decisions by Thomas Sowell and be shamed into the stupidity you actually have compared to a true titan. So yes, thank you for those recommendations to folks who are interested. All right.
I can't get the wah, huh. What is, I'm looking at that title and I'm trying to like spin it. Critical thinking. What is it good for?
Absolutely. No. In fact, what is it? All right.
Say it again.
Say it again. That's not very critical examination. All right. Drew Stevens says, "Hi, docs. Was wondering if you have any thoughts." Nope. Next question.
And
if so, what they are on fitness trackers that use heart rate variability to measure training stress and recovery. Whoop is the only one I'm aware of. The idea is really interesting to me, but I honestly just don't understand the science behind it. Don't worry, neither do the tracker people. Just kidding. I'll let James get to that. But I honestly just don't understand the science behind it and know if it's worthwhile or not. I've seen several lifters on social media using them. Those are sponsored people. I'm just kidding. But they all seem to be sponsored by the company. That's sort of a red flag. Oops, I guess I was right. Is there any merit to them? Could they be used to help hone an individual's volume landmarks for lifting, or are they more beneficial for aerobic activities? Please forgive me if you've talked about this previously. I'm still working through the massive backlog of webinars. No, don't ever ask for that kind of forgiveness. James?
Yeah, so I actually had the fortune of using the Whoop. The Whoop guy sent me one, and I used it for a long time. I stopped using it.
Hey, James, when he sent it to you, did you respond in the email like, Whoop, there it is? And he's like, wow, I've never heard that. You're like, really? He's like, no, really, you fucking funny asshole, every fucking day of my life.
Yeah, exactly. I used it for a long time. I thought it was great. The thing that the trouble that I ran into with the Whoop is that I found that it weighed the heart rate variability calculation too heavily, in my opinion, because you would have days where you'd have like phenomenal gym days. And if your heart rate variability had a bad score, it would be like, whoa, you need to back off. And it's like, well, I just did this like amazing workout in the gym. What do you mean? Like, what do you, so I think for whatever calculation they had there, it was not quite where I would want it to be in terms of like trying to tie it back to the volume landmarks. That being said, I think it's great. I think it does a lot of really interesting things. It gives you a lot of data that you could feasibly just get yourself. Like you don't need the Whoop to get all that data. You could use a heart rate monitor or a sleep app or anything like that, but it really packages it in like a nice user-friendly way. Well, I feel like I'm going about this a long-winded way, but ultimately my recommendation is this for people who are in kind of traditional sports, not like, barbell sports, bodybuilding type activities. I think Whoop's a really good secondary confirmation of like systemic fatigue indices, right? Where if you're not sure and you think your athlete is maybe not quite where they're supposed to be, you could go to the Whoop and the Whoop could say like, hey, check out their HRV. And that would fall in line with our 3-tiered model where we say you need a performance, you need a phys, you need a perceptive. That would be your phys. And you say, okay, heart rate variability is pinging. I also noticed that my athlete had a bad day at the office, right? Now I got 2. That's a pretty good sign that something's not quite right. I think it's less applicable for people where systemic fatigue is not always the limiting factor. So for me, like bodybuilding, weightlifting, powerlifting, systemic fatigue is an issue, but it's just not the issue. More often than not, it's the local issue that you're dealing with. So I don't find it to be quite as useful for those populations, though it does give you a lot of good information, like especially about like sleep and stuff like that. If you're not used to tracking your sleep, I think it presents it in like a really awesome way. If you're somebody who's like an endurance athlete, it's like I would definitely consider using it. If you're a team sport or field sport athlete, I would strongly consider using it along with some other things. And then for like barbell athletes, I think it does give some cool info, but it's not like a hard sell. So heart rate variability, again, is going to be sort of a lagging indicator of systemic overreaching. That's the science behind it in a nutshell. So when your heart rate variability gets really low, it's kind of abnormally low levels, that's just generally an indicator that you are systemically overreached, right? And that means you should probably consider doing some fatigue management. Not always, but many times. So that's the idea.
Damn. That was a great answer, James. I'm glad you're here with me. I would have given a way worse answer. Declan Ward says, hi, docs. Why is it the smaller muscles recover faster than larger ones? Obviously, there is more total disruption in larger muscles, but I would imagine repair is occurring at a rate of a single fiber at a time. From my understanding, hypertrophy cycles are going to – I wonder if this is the same question. Let me see.
Can you repeat it?
From my understanding, hypertrophy cycles are going to cause largest adaptation in the myofiber, where strength cycles largely lead to adaptations in the nervous system and connective tissue. But do strength and or peaking cycles lead to, okay, that totally different question. All right, so let's answer the first one. I thought it was an expansion on the first one, but it's actually just different.
Gotcha.
Why is it the smaller muscles recover faster than larger ones? Obviously, there is more total disruption in larger muscles, but I don't imagine repairs occurring at the rate of a single fiber at a time. So there could be a lot of reasons. One is that they don't actually recover any faster, but the imposition of total stress is higher on larger muscles. So, for example, how much force transduction can you really put through the tendon, the muscle plus tendon of your biceps? Well, you can do some damage, right? And 20 sets of biceps does some damage, and it, distributed over all the myofibrils and the various parts of connective tissue around them. It's a lot, right? And then it takes you, let's say, 3 days to recover from that. On the other hand, what about your quads? How much total fuck-upness can your quads power? Because your quads are so big, they can generate so much force, it fucks them up more, right? And number two, there is definitely a scaling of total tissue size and amount of disruption with the degree of healing. Okay, so even if healing does occur at the cellular level, but look at it this way: if you give a mouse surgery, the mouse recovers in like minutes to hours. Humans recover in weeks to months. Well, how come? Every single body process scales with body size, allometrically, I might add, but it absolutely scales with body size. Flies and shit like that undergo unbelievably rapid transformations. They'll regrow limbs in like 2 fucking hours. I ain't never seen a fucking iguana do that shit. They lose limbs. It takes them weeks to regrow their shit. So the total amount of work that has to be done is simply higher. I'll put it to you this way. You're almost asking the same question of, okay, if a tornado of the same size goes through a neighborhood, and it's a small neighborhood and it fucks up 5 houses, why is it different than if a tornado goes and fucks up a huge neighborhood of 500 houses? Like, per house, the amount of fixing is the same time. Yeah, totally, but your body has only so many resources, and all of a sudden it has to fix 500 fucking houses instead of 5. Fuck, man, that could be a really, really big difference. And also, because of the force imposition is higher, the tornado's bigger. So it fucks up 1,000 instead of that. So with those two things just by themselves, you get to start feeling that this is a thing. Another quick, not even analogy, I would actually call this, for all of you brainy fucks, this is a homology. It's the same type of process, right? Like that. So if you have a small cut on your hand, how long does that take to heal? Not long. If you have a large cut, how long does it take to heal? Like, longer. I mean, but the processes that heal the cut are the same fundamentally. Shouldn't they go at the same speed? Well, your body doesn't have infinite resources. And once damage gets to a certain level, there are some structural elements that work differently in recompositions. For example, if a cut is big enough, connecting the two sides becomes really tough. And that process takes a long time. And the closing the distance takes a long time. If you fuck your quads up in a way that's just not possible for you to fuck your biceps up with the same number of sets, it could be a different kind of healing. Like, the structural damage could be at a grade higher, and then it just takes longer. Like, for example, once DOM sets in, the whole cycle just takes a long time. Who the fuck ever gets bicep DOMs? Fucking nobody. If you successfully got bicep DOMs, your quads and biceps probably heal at about the same rate, but you probably don't. So that next degree of bicep damage probably takes double the sets to do than quads would, and then you're back to square one. So I'll put it to you this way, hilariously, you get very, very similar rates of healing, even if muscle sizes are different, if you impose the same throughput of volume load through your biceps or through your quads. But if you do the math on that, like, James, imagine doing a 5x20 leg press workout, but then converting that to how many bicep curls you have to do to the same work. You'd be like, wait a minute, that's 150 sets of biceps at my 1RM. There's no way that's going to happen. And if it does, sure, your biceps will take pretty close to as long as your quads to recover.
Yeah, that was a really good answer too. I think one last thing, it's very much related to what Dr. Mike said. I think there's also vascularization differences in some of those small muscles compared to, not to say that, I don't want to use the word capillary density because that's what we usually use, because that kind of is more of an endurance training adaptation kind of discussion. But essentially, when you have really, really large muscles, the density at which the vascularization hits all of the muscle tissue is much lower versus a smaller muscle. You have that same size artery or vein running through. It hits a huge percentage, like swath of that actual tissue area. So recovery is a little bit easier in that regard.
Very true. There's also the same thing with lymph. Immune elements taken out by lymph just takes longer for larger muscles. It's just a thing, man. It's at every level. of size of every complex system, smaller systems get things done faster. How long does it take to pass a law in New York City versus a law in some little small town in suburban New York? Fucking a day versus a month or a year? How come?
Yeah.
More shit has to happen and there's more moving parts, plain and simple. And there's, like James said, there's like a diffusion constant problem, right? Like there's a reason that spiders don't think, fucking God, don't get bigger than a certain amount, because spiders actually have lungs. They just absorb all of their oxygen through their skin. There's a certain size they just can't get to. To get bigger size, you have to have lungs. Then that whole process of perfusion requires a circulatory system. It just takes more time. So a spider can breathe in a microsecond and get all of its oxygen. A spider can't hold its breath if it, quote unquote, did that. If you just got rid of all the oxygen, this shit would die really quick. You can hold your breath for 30 seconds because there's still oxygen going around, but that whole thing takes longer to occur.
Yes. Ugh.
Elephant giving birth. That's all I'm going to say.
Fucking spiders.
Actually, so a hilarious fact, during one of the eras of evolution, this was prior to the dinosaurs, Earth had way more oxygen than it does now, and a lot of insects were up to 1 meter long, including dragonflies that were 1 meter long.
Whoa, that'd be trippy.
Can you imagine a reprogramming the time machine accidentally getting out? Like, holy fuck, you close that fucking door. Get me out of here. It's like the Cretaceous, like 65 million BC. You're like, whatever. I don't give a shit. Give me an asteroid.
Fuck out of here. Give me the dinosaurs.
Giant fucking dragonfly.
Prometheus bugs.
100%. Fuck. 100% of that shit. All right. Hayden Dunn says, currently in a mass phase, hitting my metabolite block before reloading. You know, I wish reloading was used.
I don't think we tackled the second question.
Oh, shit. We forgot the second one altogether. Thanks, James.
No problem.
All right. From my understanding, hypertrophy cycles are going to cause the largest adaptations in the myofiber, where strength cycles largely lead to adaptations in the nervous system and connective tissue. But do strength and or peaking cycles lead to any significant changes in the myofiber, possibly changing the amount of contractile proteins or causing a shift towards more fast twitch proteins? They probably don't cause a shift towards faster twitch proteins unless you did a volume phase before, and they will. But the reason they cause a shift during faster twitch proteins is probably because you're doing less volume of work, not the specific type of work they're doing. I will say that you may see changes in the alignment of muscle and myofibers. So that's actually neither connective to tissue nor nervous system. That's structural adaptation in the micro to macro scale of the muscle. James, are you familiar with any actual muscle cell adaptations to strength training?
I mean, there's the same hypertrophic ones that we would see in many cases. I mean, the intensity's high enough, and if the volume's high enough, we'll definitely see some growth. But outside of that, it is largely more of a nervous system type issue. I'm trying to think of anything really specific. But I mean, like what Mike was saying before, you got guys who train like powerlifters and they get fucking huge, right? That's still an overloading stimulus for hypertrophy, so the muscle cells will actually grow. Outside of that, I can't think of any.
Yeah. Hayden Dunn says, currently in a mass phase and hitting my metabolite block before deloading on vacation in 4 weeks. Oh, that's right. That's the guy who asked which way he should go. I'm taking Dr. Mike's advice by ramping it up the first week of metabolite from normal and then burning like the sun for 2-3 weeks, as he says. This is the first time I've ever done full metabolite phase and obviously one while massing. This is my first real productive long-term mass. All of a sudden, what are the top 2-3 tips you would say I should keep in mind to make the most of this phase? Thanks. Can't wait to get after it. I'll give one and then James can give one. My tip is, even though you're doing metabolites, don't get too focused on cranking out as many reps as you can. In the higher rep ranges and with a shorter break, still focus on the mind-muscle connection of contracting and putting tons of tension through the target muscle. So when you're doing skull crushers, don't just go, okay, I got to get through this. Really slow down the eccentric, really feel it out. And as the burn fucks you up, really refocus on the triceps so that you get the shit where you want your stimulus to fatigue ratio to go up, James.
Yeah, that was good. I noticed this is how I experience it. Maybe you'll experience it differently, but I noticed for me on the metabolite stuff, the feeling of flatness is like a very sharp drop. You go you'll do like 2 sets, 3 sets, great. 4 sets, great. 5 sets, great. 6 set is awful. You just immediately get like no pump, nothing. You're just like, well, this kind of burned and it just kind of felt.
No pump chump.
Yeah, no pump chump, exactly. And it just kind of felt awful. And I found that like I use that feeling and a combination of controlling my rep ranges to know what's a reasonable cutoff point is. So sometimes you might, like this last one I did, there were some exercises where I would do like 7 sets of something just to keep it going. But usually around for me, like 6 or 7 sets, after that would just be an immediate like no pump, it just feels like shit. And even if I'm still in my rep range, it was just like, I could do another set, but I don't feel like I'm going to get what I want out of it. So use rep ranges and use that flatness kind of cutoff. If you feel flat after doing like 4 or 5 sets, that might be a reasonable point to stop and maybe choose a new exercise if you have more volume to make up for.
It's a really good idea. James, I just introduced an interesting concept during a talk about stimulus proxies at a webinar that I did, like a paid webinar or whatever, where I introduced the hypothesis that if you reach the point in your workout at which the pump no longer improves set to set and your performance is bottomed out as far as performance, like you get like sets in that leg press of 20, 16, 14, and then 10, 10, 9, 8,
Yes.
8, 8,
Yes.
8. Once you get to the first part of that and clearly nothing's changing, I think your workout's probably over.
Yeah.
I think you're just incurring damage at that point.
At least that exercise is for sure done, right?
For
Like
sure.
whatever. And then
For
maybe something else, but I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's not even just that exercise.
Yeah,
It's
most of the time you're probably just done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. All right, so
Yeah, that's a good point.
You're serious about your goals, and the RP Diet app is here to help. It creates a diet for your specific needs, lets you choose your favorite foods, and tells you exactly how much of them to eat and when. Expert System AI guides you along to keep you on track to your goals. For less than $15 a month, you have one of the most powerful diet coaches in your pocket. Cutting-edge data science tailored to your exact goals. The future is here today.
Daniel Hacker says, I need a bit of guidance on my next step in my macro cycle. I'm just fucking with you.
I don't know why that was funny, but it does read funny.
I have about 1.5 weeks left of my maintenance phase. I'm scheduled to then do 2 measures of massing. Obviously, we don't know when gyms are going to open. Should I extend my maintenance phase a couple of weeks more because gyms will likely be open in the next month? Yeah, I think that's great. Let's see what else you say. Should I do my mass as scheduled if gyms do open during my meso? Just do a mini deload recycle because obviously my movements would change a lot from what it would be since I only have the barbell and plates and bench currently. Should I do my mass as scheduled? And if gyms do open during my meso, just do a mini deload and recycle? Yes, either is fine. You just have to make an assessment, Daniel, of when the political situation, I don't want to ghost you out and tell people where you live. I know where you live. But I'm not sure what the political situation is there. If I had to take a guess, I would say I have no fucking clue. So
he's in Florida, right?
Thanks for ghosting him out, James.
Oh, sorry. I thought that was no. I think
public knowledge. Yeah, yeah. Florida's a big place. So good luck finding Daniel Hacker. But yeah, so he is in Florida. Florida seems to be on the cusp of opening, but then again, it's a very politically controversial state. It's getting a lot of attention. Like Georgia open and nobody gives a shit, but Florida is opening sequentially, and a lot of people seem to care. Because summer's heating up and there's beaches and there's all these new cases of COVID-19, which is going to be anyway, but people are freaking out. So I don't know if I bet on it. I think a safe bet is to do another 1 to 2. I'll tell you this. Actually, here's my best advice. Do another 1 to 2 weeks tentatively of maintenance. And then within 1 to 2 weeks, you'll at the very least get a sense of if the gyms are going to be coming open soon, or you'll get a sense of like, looks like they're still closed for a while. And then you can make your decision as to whether or not to mask.
Yeah, I think that's a solid recommendation.
Yeah. If you get 2 weeks in and it's like gyms are opening in a week, then you should continue maintenance. If you get 2 weeks in and everyone's like, dude, there's been a spike in cases, we're back to more lockdowns, then clearly you just start your mass.
I mean, Florida just had a fucking UFC event. I'm pretty sure the gyms are going to be open not too long.
All right. Denise says, hello, it's me again. So actually my name's pronounced more like the Russians do. Cool. Denise said that. So this week's questions are, Mike said that doing... No, you said.
No, you said.
All right.
I hope he misquotes you here. That would make my day.
That'd be so sweet. Mike has said that doing the same movement in a week is okay, but it is better to do 2 different rep ranges. Yep, I did say that.
Damn it.
So how much would you think there is a difference in hypertrophy between doing squats 2 times a week with the same rep range, 5 to 10, and doing 2 times a week with different rep ranges, 5 to 10, and 10 to 20? I would actually say probably none, or almost no difference in hypertrophy in the short term. However, in the long term, it's a fatigue management problem, specifically with joint and connective tissue problems. You may have all the insight in the world to try to do 2 heavy squat workouts a week, but when you get sufficiently strong, that becomes prohibitive because your joints are too fucked up. However, if you do heavy squats first, say Monday and Wednesday you do lighter squats, you can do lighter squats and your joints probably won't get fucked up much more. And let's say you do leg presses on Friday. By the time you come back to squats again Monday, you're fucking golden. But if you do heavy, a lot of times not only does that really beat up your joints, but sometimes that second workout just turns out to be not as productive because you can't push as close to failure because you're super fucked up. And also, I would say that second workout is a little bit more injurious now. Like if you're a little bit fucked up connective tissue-wise from sets of 5 to 10, sets of 10 to 20 probably aren't going to cause any acute injury. On the other hand, if you're fucked up in sets of 5 to 10, you do 5 to 10 again, and you almost certainly would try to hit another PR. Like you do 300 one day, on Monday, on Wednesday, you're going to try 305. Man, that's kind of like sustaining a pre-injury to get ready to get injured. So I'd be very wary of that.
I used to do a lot of that kind of like 5 to 10 on this day, 5 to 10 on the next day. And man, I wish I could take that back.
For sure. All right, next question. If I wanted to be better at squatting for 8 reps, would it be better to do 2 times a week with 8 reps, or 8 reps and next 10 reps, or something like that? I think some variation is always optimal. So I think if you want to get better at squatting for 8 reps, I would actually recommend the following. 1 time a week, you squat for sets of like roughly 6, heavier than you would for 8. And later in the week, you squat for roughly sets of 10 to 12, right? And that way you're sort of around that 8. And as both improve, I promise you, with every bit of knowledge that I have and that James has in his head, your sets of 8 will go up. And then when you get really ready to get as big of sets of 8 as possible to show off, you do a couple of workouts where various loading ranges or intensities, relative efforts, and sets of actually 8 to practice the 8, and then you'll be good to go. So
yeah, I totally agree. I think just one thing to keep in mind, like there's probably should be a significant differential in the rep ranges that you're using. And it's kind of hard to put a fine point on that, but like 8 on one day, 10 on the other day, to me, that's like the same general range that you're operating in. And so kind of going back to Mike's recommendation, having one that's like kind of up into that next rep range. And we usually say 10 to 20. So, something maybe like 10 to 15, and then another one that's a little bit heavier, 5 to 8, something like that would be a nice spread. Whereas like doing like 8s and 10s, it's like you're mostly doing the same thing at that point.
Yeah. I would actually say, like, if you really wanted a short-term plan to maximize sets of 8 performance, probably a really good way to do it is Monday, Wednesday, Friday squatting program, where you do like sets of 4 to 6 on Monday, sets of 7 to 9 on Wednesday, and sets of like 10 to 15 on Friday, and just getting stronger in all those rep ranges over the course of multiple weeks. And then, man, your sets of 8 are going to skyrocket. And when you really want to show off, still show off on that Wednesday when you do sets of 8, but that Monday, instead of doing sets of 4 to 6 heavy, take a deload and just do 2 sets of 5, but just like with half the weight you usually do, you're going to feel like $1 million, and that Wednesday you're going to hit a huge PR for a set of 8.
Yeah, it's like a small off squat program. Oh man.
In small off with squat, yes, Denise. Oh, perfect. His name's perfect.
That's true.
A motherfucker named Denise is for sure the guy to survive small off and tell everyone it works.
Yes.
All right. I also get a little bit confused when I was listening about autoregulation with adding sets. When you said that you can add a set even if you recover on time, if you train chest Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, do you aim to be soreness-free before you go to bed on Tuesday, or by the time you start training on Wednesday? By the time I start training on Wednesday. I mean, you can make trillion conjectures and do it differently, but I would say the hard cutoff is by the time you're warming up Wednesday, you should not have any soreness. If someone's like, would it be better if your soreness healed Tuesday night? I'm actually not sure. Maybe there's a little bit more super healing you want to do. But the soreness thing to James and I is less of okay, if you recover Monday, then you didn't do enough. Like, we don't say that. That's performance. Soreness is a hard stop top-end recovery cutoff. So if you're still overlapping sore, you're doing too much. Okay, but if you get a little less sore than that, is it better than even a less sore than a little less sore? Maybe. We have no idea. But like if you're Wednesday, if you're still sore and you're benching and warming up, then you did too much Monday, and that's it.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I'm going to throw Reps in Reserve guy a little bit of credit here, because I think sometimes people hear that and they assume that means that any overlapping soreness is bad at all times, and then they train hyper conservatively. So what I would encourage you to think about is like, don't use it as an excuse not to train hard. Really is kind of the point I'm trying to say. It's like, training, you get sore. Everybody fucking knows it. It's just a natural part of the process. Now, like Mike says, we don't want it to be overlapping all the time. That's not a good use of fatigue management. But at the same time, if you're like, well, that means I'm only going to do 1.5 set, meaning I do like one hard set and like one set at like 10 RIR. It's like, oh, come on, man.
I do like a two trial decision system. Let's say I train chest Monday, Wednesday, and also Friday, but just Monday, Wednesday focus. I do 5 sets on a Monday, and then Wednesday my chest is still sore. but like it's just a little bit sore. I think like, adaptation occurs really quickly. So next Monday, I'm going to try 5 sets again. And if I get sore again and I'm still sore through Wednesday, then next week I'm going to do 4. But I'm not just going to go like, oh my God, I got overlapping soreness down to 2 sets. Like, nah, that's okay.
Right.
You'll probably adapt over time. What we really want to do, and this is in the autoregulation algorithms we published online, the set progression algorithm, if you're sore from Monday on Wednesday, don't go up next Monday. Don't do that.
Right.
Right. So you can actually stay, just make sure it's something you can recover from in the longer term.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. I usually get super sore in adductors when I'm
Oh my
coming back
God,
to- Oh my God. Wait, you got a clone. You got a brother in this thread. I usually get super sore in adductors when coming back to squats from only 2 sets already, but my quads could take more volume. So my question is, when the gym's open, should I ease in with squats and do some additional quad movements to reach MEV on quads, or should I just raise squat sets to have overlapping soreness and adductors, hope they get used to in later weeks? I would say the first option is much, much better. Especially in adductors, my experience with overlapping soreness is it just causes adductor injury after about 3 sessions. I've done it like a bunch. Also, adductor tears can be really nasty. It's nothing you want for yourself. So don't overlapping soreness. Overlapping soreness in biceps, like motherfucking, you don't tear your biceps. You'll be fine. Adductors, chest, hamstrings, overlapping soreness, not a good idea. Them shits snap.
I was going to say the same thing, so totally agree. And that's just one, like, and if you're one of those people, like myself included, and somebody else earlier in this webinar, like if you get a lot of adductor on your high bar squat, then you just know that ahead of time and then program in supplemental quad work, like some knee extensions or something on that day, because you know that you're not hitting your quad MEV because you're limited by your adductors.
Yep. All right, next question. If I'm doing a split where I have chest and back on the same day and arms on another day, if I do 2 chest and back days and 2 arm days, is that basically biceps and triceps frequency 4 times a week? Right, something like that. I mean, so it's not an overloading frequency necessarily 4 times a week, but you probably get some kind of stimulus from the chest and back days. So I definitely say it wouldn't technically count as 2 times a week. At the end of the day, whatever number of times a week you count and write on your paper is irrelevant to the physiology that is actually going on. So, if you do train chest and back and then arms and chest and back and then arms, and someone asks you like, hey, how many times a week do you train biceps and triceps? How you answer that question is completely irrelevant to what's actually going on in your body. You could say, I train them twice a week, and that would be sort of technically right. You could also say, train them 4 times a week, and it would sort of technically be right. You could even say, well, I guess sort of train them 3 times a week. If you add the 2 sessions, they'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? So you can answer that question however much you like. At the end of the day, like, it also depends on who's counting. Like, James Krieger, Brad Schoenfeld, myself, Eric Helms, James Hoffman, we would count those frequencies as slightly different based on definitions. Like Brad Schoenfeld uses all muscles involved. So to him, that would be, I believe, 4 times a week, bicep and tricep training. James and I would say that for most people, it's just direct work only. So that for us would be twice a week, right? But like fundamentally, you're still getting a hit. So just know that in the back of your head when you're programming and analyzing. Don't be like, man, should I try a program with 4 times a week bicep and tricep? That'll be crazy different from what I'm doing now. No, it won't be crazy different because you're already sort of doing basically 3. Or if someone says like carte blanche gives you a new program and there's 3 specific bicep and tricep workout stuff, but they're all clustered so that there's no overlap with chest and back, and someone's like, hey, this is like more frequency than you used to, you'd be like, yeah, not really. I'm kind of used to something pretty similar. So you could just ease into that, right? Whereas if it was truly only twice a week, you did chest and triceps one day, 2 days a week, and then back and biceps 2 days a week, then it would really be 2 sessions. If someone was like, hey, here's a 4-session plan, you'd be like, ooh, that's actually way more than I'm used to doing. So just as long as you know what you're getting yourself into, I think it's fine. James?
Yeah, and just to use a shitty sporting analogy, one thing that we run into in the sport world a lot is we'll say, okay, we're training legs twice a week, but we're also like running or sprinting twice a week. And so you go, okay, if I squat one day and then I sprint the next day, and then I do another leg training session the next day, and then I sprint again the next day, like, do I count those all as legs? And it's like, well, the sprint days aren't really stimulating hypertrophy, but there's still something that you should at least be aware of. You're still training those muscles every single day at that point. So it's kind of pick and choose your battles on that, but just be aware, like, yeah, that's going to have some overlapping use and that might cause wear and tear or fatigue management considerations. So,
yeah. All right. Next question. Is it better to do tricep and chest in the same session or separate? That really depends on the rest of the structure of your program. So if you do, so ideally you do them in different sessions, but that doesn't mean that you do your triceps with back, because it sort of depends on whichever one you want to progress the most, you do first. If you do chest and triceps in the same session, whichever one you're doing first gets the best progress. On the other hand, if you were doing back and biceps in the same session, back and triceps in the same session. If you do triceps first, they still get the better benefit. And if you do triceps after, they still don't do as well. There is something to be said for sort of local to systemic fatigue ratio. We've talked about that elsewhere. That maybe is good evidence for, or good reasoning for doing triceps and chest in the same session being a bit better. But then again, you have to factor fatigue. For example, if you train your chest and triceps in the same session, chest first, triceps second, your performance on triceps might be pretty low because you're super fucked up from chest, or it might be potentiated from heavy pressing and actually be quite good. Sometimes your elbows are really warmed up. On the other hand, if you do back and triceps, if you do back first, it could potentiate your triceps or it could really fatigue them. Who knows? You basically want a situation in which you recover each muscle group on time. A muscle group does not interfere with another muscle group's training. We'll get to that on your next part of your question. And also that you get really, really good performances. And for different situations, different folks, different arrangements, it will happen differently. So for example, if you were doing, someone said like, hey, it's better to do back with triceps, not the other way around. You're just getting dog shit tricep workouts. So you try to do it with chest again, you're getting amazing tricep workouts. Then you have your answer, right? And if everything's healing on time, then you're fucking super golden. So there's that.
A lot of it's trial and error and kind of getting out of like the set kind of piece approach where people are like chest and triceps, back and biceps. Like you can do chest and triceps just because they kind of are synergistic and line up well. But let's say you're training triceps 3 times a week. So one day you might do chest and triceps. Another day you might just do triceps and then a bunch of other shit that have nothing to do with each other. And then on a third day you might do triceps first and then chest last. Like it doesn't, you have to get out of the mindset of like, these are the common things that, and this is how I clump them together. And you start thinking about, okay, I have a muscle group that needs to be trained X number of times per week. What's the most logical way of sequencing these things together?
Yeah. All right. Here we go. Next question. If I have chest on Tuesday, is it better to do triceps Monday or Wednesdays? There actually is a very, very distinct, clear answer to that. It depends on which one you want to prioritize first. So if you're really pushing your triceps to have priority, then it's probably better to train them on Monday because then they won't be fatigued and you'll get the most out of them. And then, yeah, your chest training won't be as good, but who cares because your triceps are priority. On the other hand, if you're really prioritizing your chest, it had better be fresh. And so tricep training is better done Wednesday. That's it. So you got to figure out which one.
And you could also just like experiment and find out like what frequency just tends to be better all around. Like you might find that one is like too interfering with your chest. One's just like not stimulative enough for your triceps. And maybe there's something in between.
Yep. And if you're going to train chest and triceps on the same day and you train both at least twice a week, there's actually an easy answer that trains them relatively equivalently. Monday, you do chest first, tricep second. Thursday, you do triceps first, chest second. Problem solved.
Oh, yeah.
They'll sort of get an equivalent amount of work. Last one, I believe. Yep. I don't know if this is an individual thing or almost similar to everyone, but in a rep range of 5 to 10 is going from a 3 reps in reserve to 2 reps in reserve, usually 2.5 kilogram jump or 5 kilogram jump. Until now, I was usually training going up 2.5 kilograms. However, I always came to 1 to 0 RR at the end of a mesocycle, but I was wondering if maybe starting too high and that what I thought was 3 RR was really 2 RR, and I was going lowering my RR by 0.5 and not by 1 through the meso. So, it really, first of all, it's just really auto-regulated. Depends on someone's strength level. So if you're squatting, if you're leg pressing, let's say 700 pounds, which is not unreasonable, you could be making 10 kilogram jumps and that's 1 RIR each. If you're doing lateral raises, a 1.25 kilogram jump might be 2 RIR. So it really depends on the strength of the exercise. It depends on the individual's progression, a bunch of different stuff. What we say is make a conservative effort first. Just assume it's 2.5 and not 5, and do a mesocycle. But if at the end of the meso you increased it for 4 weeks or 5 weeks by 2.5, you thought you were going to be at 0 RIR, but really you're like at 2, well, then clearly it's a little more than 2.5. So maybe some weeks you can go up 2.5, other weeks you can go up by 5. There's no, your ideal increase could be 3.75. What the fuck are you going to do? You're not going to put 3.75 kilos on the bar. So you might do 2.5 and add a rep. Or you might do some weeks 2.5, some weeks 5, and so on and so forth. There's different ways to do it, just as long as you're honest each week about what RIR you really think you're hitting. Like if last week was super fucking easy, you fucking know it was, go up a little more this next week. If last week was really fucking pretty tough, go up a little less. When Charlie and I were just finishing our fat loss cycle, back when we were training at the actual gym at the beginning, because it was a fat loss cycle, we were training a Smith machine in which balance wasn't an issue. So Smith skull crushers, we went up by 2.5 pounds per side, just on one side, a total per week, right? So basically, like, it was 160 one week and then 162.5 the next, and 165. Well, like, enormous guys, people are probably like, you fucking kidding me, you're going up. I did like, exactly, because that is the progression that probably gets us to where we want. And sometimes we would add an extra rep, and sometimes we wouldn't, based on how that RIR was going that day or that week. We'd always hit a little mini PRs, but sometimes we push it a little bit, sometimes not. So the answer to your question is, it really just comes down to auto-regulation and what works for you, and fuck what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, and also consider that it might be adding no weight and just doing more reps too, and that's always totally fine. That's, people for some reason don't think that's good, but like if you're on the low end of your goal rep range, like if you're getting like 665, it would be completely reasonable to not add any weight that next week and try and get 765 or like 876 or something like that. And that would be completely fine.
I had a whole progression this summer where I started doing incline bench pressing on the Smith machine, and I started very low RIR, or sorry, very high reps in reserve to 275 pounds or something like that, and at like first set of 8. And all I did over the next multiple weeks was add reps. I stayed at 275, and I got up to doing 275 for like 16 or 17 reps. And then I started adding weight, and eventually cracked the 300 barrier and so on and so forth. So that's totally a thing, especially if you're adapting really quickly and it's a low rep range. Adding a whole rep is a lot more stimulus, but sometimes you can do it. So just fucking do it.
Yeah.
All right. Areem Salam. Areem Salam. So, hi, doctors. Question number 1. Is there a specific time to sleep in or get more rest? Ooh, this is a good question. Areem asked it on Instagram, but Areem, thank God you're on here. And I do prefer you ask questions on here for the only reason that we can do a way better job of answering them than my one-word bullshit answers on Instagram. I'm sure you've seen that before. And literally, like, I can't, it's a fucking cell phone. Am I going to type out a fucking dissertation? Also, that shit disappears forever. These things are here for good. So this is a great place to ask questions. So Areem, on the Instagram, I believe he asked, like, what's the deal with sleeping in? Like, is it ever a good sports science idea, or is it just more like emotional? James, is there a time when like sleeping in is really like warranted?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are times where it could be useful, and that could be done kind of on an auto-regulated fashion. Usually the case you would make is when somebody was like underslept for several days leading up to that. But normally my recommendation is that consistency is greater than accuracy in this case, where maintaining your biorhythms, like what time you wake and what time you go to bed, is probably a bigger priority than saying like, should I sleep in today because my workout was extra hard? That would be a poor use of the auto-regulated strategy, in my opinion. I could be wrong on that, but that's my opinion. So just because you're feeling it doesn't mean you should necessarily sleep in. If you had to catch a red-eye flight and then had a really hard time getting back to sleep for the last like 2 days, and you have a day where you not have to rush off to work or anything, and you say, you know, I might sleep in a few extra hours today because I've been really fucked up from lack of sleep, I think that's perfectly fine. But I think it's a poor strategy just because of making bad decisions in the gym. So like if you're so fatigued all the time that you need to start actually adding more sleep because you're so fucked up, it's probably a fatigue management issue, not a I need more sleep issue.
Yeah. Also, James, correct me if I'm wrong, but like habits and sleep are more important than trying to make up this and that here and there.
Yeah, exactly.
The ideal amount of sleep is that
Consistency.
you never need to sleep in because you're always really well rested. So.
Yeah. So consistency greater than accuracy, like whether or not you needed, if you always get 8 and today you actually needed 8.7 hours, like I would still say get that 8, wake up at the same time. And it seems to be more pressing evidence that says like waking at the same time seems to be more important than sleeping or starting your sleep opportunity at the same time. So I would say keeping that wake cycle is probably very, very important to be consistent.
And this really is shitty because it requires forethought and missing out on nighttime activities. But the honest to God, the adult's way of getting the rest you need if you're behind on rest is to go to bed earlier. I know it blows, right? My wife and I do it every now and again, and we always thank God we fucking did it. Like, and as we get older, I think we just can't sleep in anymore because we're not children. Oh, with enough growth hormone, you can sleep in however long you want. But I'm trying not to die sooner than later. So the thing is like at 9 a.m. ish, I'm just up. Like it doesn't even matter. Like I can go to bed at 3, at 9, I'm like, and then so what ends up happening is if we're a little tired, a little behind the times, instead of going to bed at like midnight, we'll go to bed at like 10:30. And it's like super lame because there's like still people partying outside when we go to bed, but then we still sleep till 9. We get extra like hour and a half of sleep, and then we feel like karate kicking the fucking world. So definitely just go to bed earlier, man. And it sucks, but sleeping in is worse than going to bed earlier.
Definitely agree.
Number 2 from Areem. Can incline pressing alone maintain mid and lower chest size? For beginners and early intermediates, yes. For intermediates and advanced, no. But maintaining lower mid chest size is really easy to do if you just pepper in a tiny bit of volume from flat pressing. You don't have to do any decline pressing. So if you do mostly incline work, just 25% or even 15% of your weekly volume, like a couple of sets a week of flat pressing, will maintain your lower and mid chest just fine while your clavicular chest grows, your upper chest. However, only incline pressing, not a great idea if you want to maintain mid and lower chest size. If you're more advanced and if you were dieting for hypocaloric conditions and trying to lose fat, then I would say that's not the wisest idea.
I agree, and I think if the goal is maintenance of overall chest size, a flat bench variation. If you were for whatever reason you were pressed and you could only pick one, I would pick a flat variation at that point. It would be an odd situation, but who knows?
Totally. Number 3, what is loose skin? How does it form? Loose skin is just skin that is formed to enclose a formerly larger structure that is now smaller. It forms with the multiplication and thus creation of new skin cells. What can we do about it? From my understanding, other than surgery, jack shit.
Yep, that's my understanding as well.
Number 4, how can smoking affect muscle growth and fat loss? Smoking enhances fat loss because it actually increases your metabolism and it makes you not hungry. However, it sure as hell dampens muscle growth. There's been a few examinations where nicotine itself is not great for muscle growth. And it actually causes less of a pump. It actually decreases the vasodilation effect to your local muscles, so you don't get as good of pumps from training. So smoking cigarettes, not great for muscle growth. Probably not hugely impactful, but definitely not good. And actually pretty decent for fat loss, but it does kill you more reliably than almost anything else we know. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, and not to mention the long-term systemic limitations on how much you can train. Like if you're
totally. Work capacity goes
to the toilet.
Number 5, what would be the benefit of a little bit of salt 20 minutes before you work out? Dick,
this is one of those funny questions. Like, what do you think the benefit is? Like,
So
do you want us to speculate on what salt does?
If you're taking in very, very low salt levels because you're on anabolic steroids and they make you very salt retentive, taking salt 20 minutes before your workout gives you really cool vascularity for like the first half of your workout, which is sweet for photo shoots. That is exclusively the benefit of salt. And also it'll enhance your performance because you're actually mildly hyponatremic. But if you have normal sodium intake, or like you eat as much salt as you feel like eating, then it's going to actually a little bit of salt 20 minutes before your workout will literally go completely unnoticed because you will have no idea in any sense of the word that's happening.
Yeah, like if you're doing a lot of like heavy endurance training and you're like a heavy sweater and it's hot outside, like it might be an okay idea to do that. But
then you should just be eating salt for the whole day before.
Exactly. Yes.
Number 6, if I'm going to deload next week, would it have any benefit if I straight up do as much work as I can do in my workouts, meaning do crazy volumes a week or deload? No, because you could do non-functional overreaching. You create so much damage that the supercompensatory effect can't make up for it on net balance nearly as much as it would, and you'll get worse results. So what we say is just go a little bit over MRV. I should really, really feel like shit anyway, and then good enough. This last week of training is not bless you, James. Last week of training is not a psychological vent for your frustrations. It is a calculated decision by someone who knows sports science to get as jacked as possible. So don't do as much as you can. Also, it's a great way to get hurt.
Consider, Areem, that like if you're doing crazy volumes that last week, it's like, what were you doing before then? But it probably means that your program was maybe in a bit of disarray ahead of time, right? Because like by the time you get to your last week, you should already be like feeling it. So if you can
you shouldn't want to do crazy high.
You shouldn't want to do crazy stuff. You should be like, I have to just kind of get through this week and hope for the best, and then I get a break, right? If you have that much gas in the tank where you're like, I'm going to double what I had been doing, it's like, okay, well, you were just under training that whole time, more likely than not.
Number 8, how many reps percent is too low not to be considered strength training? And how many reps is so high that the weight is too heavy? I think that's backwards. Based on Brad Schoenfeld studies, I think it's between 5 and 40, but since you don't need to go that high or that low, maybe a range between 8 to 30 reps. So anything above 5 reps has been shown to enhance hypertrophy, and anything for sure below 30 reps. The sort of sense of 3, 4, and 5 definitely cause hypertrophy, but the stimulus to fatigue ratio probably is not great, and actually you need more sets of 3 and 4, almost for sure from all the studies. then you set equivalent of higher reps. And I would also say sets of 5 and 6 are suspect there too. 5, 6, 7, I would say, like if you're just doing lots of those sets, then hi, honey. My wife has returned from the ICU. So if you're doing a lot of sets of like anywhere between 5 and 7 reps, I would say you'd probably be working extra hard and beating up your joints extra hard for the same amount of hypertrophy. And the other hand, anything north of 30 reps is the stimulus to fatigue ratio again isn't that great. So you have to do more of those sets to get the same hypertrophy, but they still work. So that's really 5 to 30 is really probably the best answer. But most of your training should occur between, I would say, between sets of 8, most of your training, not all of them, sets of 8 and sets of 25. 8 to 25 is really the more golden range. But I wouldn't take that too much to heart. If someone's doing sets of 29, I wouldn't be like, you fucking idiot. You know, it works just fine.
No, that's a good answer.
And then lastly, he says, thanks for answering my questions here on Instagram. Sweet. Areem, stop asking questions on Instagram and start answering here. Legit. Like, it takes me nothing to ignore your questions on there, Areem. No joke. And I love you a thousand times, but I can't physically answer tons of questions on Instagram. And when I do, the answers suck. But they're like, no, yes, 25. I don't want answers like that to my questions. So most people don't know about RP Plus, or they haven't signed up for it. You motherfuckers out here getting answers, intricate answers to all your questions. You're lucky. So don't tell anyone about RP Plus. I'm just kidding. Tell your friends. But honestly, the more you come on here, the better question answers you get.
For sure.
Mark Conway says, I read Mike and James, man.
Yes. That's how I always think of
the
it.
Jamaican accent. Yeah, since you guys internally read it that way. Well, excellent. That's the only way we want to think of you, Mark, is Jamaican. Remember, James, Iman Milan?
Yes. Where's he been?
I don't know, but we had an RP Plus.
Yeah, man, Milan.
Yeah, man, Milan. And he was like from Ireland, but to us, he was from the Bahamas. Eventually, he was like, hey, the island breeze is great here in Ireland.
Yeah.
All right. He says, I've completed my modified version of the metabolite phase from the 5-day male physique template. And I've just started resensitization meso maintenance calories. As mentioned, I'm currently sitting around 20-25% body fat, and I would like to start cutting after 2-3 weeks of resensitization. However, my training is based almost exclusively around 9-kilogram dumbbells. My questions are, if my gym is still closed after my resensitization meso, would you recommend starting your cut with another metabolite phase? Yes. Or would you instead recommend maintaining or gaining? I wouldn't gain. I would just maintain.
Maintain, yeah. Push the cut back.
Yeah. I'm very interested in the pros and cons of metabolite training during cut versus maintenance versus mass. Metabolite training is fine during cut. It's just not very sustainable. So then the question becomes, what do you do in the second meso, right? You can do metabolite training, honestly, for one meso and do one meso of cutting, and then hopefully that clears up, and then hopefully the gym's open by then. And then you take a short maintenance phase in the gym to get used to the weight training workouts. And that maintenance phase also clears the diet fatigue from like your 6-week metabolite phase. And then you just start on like hypertrophy phase 1 and then do cutting phase right there. You can do that. But if the gyms don't open by then, I would just go after that metabolite phase and the cutting, I would do maintenance and then maybe go into a little bit of a mass for lack of anything else to do.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a shitty situation.
It is.
And then he says, if I were to run a metabolite phase 1 on a caloric deficit, should I train just as hard as I did, progressing to from fail and increasing volume as I did during massing? Yeah, you'll have to in order to keep the muscle on, especially with a metabolite phase. Especially with those tiny dumbbells, man. You're going to be fighting to keep the muscle on the body. So.
Yeah.
Finally,
you could get creative and use like I think he's just saying like he's limited to those dumbbells. You can certainly do body weight stuff and some other stuff that might be more helpful, but.
Finally, is it normal to experience some lower back DOMs after squatting? Yes. I also find that in later weeks of the mesocycle, I chronically have some degree of residual low back glute stiffness. Yep, so do I. Nothing painful or anything that impacts my performance. However, tasks such as putting on my socks are definitely more difficult at the end of meso. This has always seemed clear after a deload is expected. It happens to me every single meso. Or could it potentially be a sign that I'm rounding my lower back at the bottom of the squat? No, that would be like DOMs type of stuff. And actually, it would be like if your rounding was a problem, it would be shooting pain down your legs. It would be local pain. Thank you both in advance for your wise tutelage. I hope you're both thriving in your coronabolic time chambers. That's Mark.
You are welcome, my friend.
Yeah, I think it's totally normal. All right, Mark Monachino. Mark Monachino. Whoa.
I like that name.
That is either a guy who owns like a cheesesteak place down the block.
I was going to say a deli.
Or he's like the super stud wrestler you have to wrestle, and he's from the better high school. Like, you're going up against
Like,
Mark
oh,
Monachino.
fuck.
He's never
Monachino?
lost since he was 5, but the kid like hates his dad. His dad makes him wrestle, and he quits during the match, and you get the girl and all that wrestling. 80s,
What a story.
like, what is it, Vision Quest type of shit? That shit is so good. It's just, there's something just, fucking beautiful.
That was a good timeline for movies.
Amazing. 1980s high school sports dramas. I'm going to make my wife watch them. Honey! Oh, she's taking a shower. But somewhere in the universe, she knows we're watching 80s high school sports drama. And she's going to be stabbing me in the dick later for making her go through that shit. All right. Hi, guys, says Mark Monachino. I've been lifting since 2012. First 5 years powerlifting, now 2 years prioritizing hypertrophy with dedicated mats and cutting paces.
Nice.
I started taking creatine in 2012 and stopped a couple of years ago because I have a strong family history of male pattern hair loss. I know the link isn't yet proven, but there's a lot of suggestive research out there that creatine might promote early hair loss in genetically susceptible guys. Unrelated, I also became vegan a few years ago. I'm very diligent overall in training nutrition. My progress has been good overall in 2 years of hypertrophy training, but recently, in my usual blood work, I noticed that since late 2016, my creatinine has steadily gone down from 114 to 77, still within normal range, but lower end normal. I don't know much about creatinine other than the fact that Google said it's a waste product from the creatine breakdown in the muscles. It's one of those, but it's not only that. My question is, how much optimality do you think I'm sacrificing by continuing to avoid creatine? So the link between creatine and creatinine is actually very, very tiny. Creatinine is usually a marker for just kidney function in general. It could vary for 50 trillion different reasons regarding that have nothing to do with creatine intake. How much optimality do you think I'm sacrificing by continuing to avoid creatine? Would you say it's still no more than a usual quote of 5% max benefit general supplements can offer? Am I likely losing an extra potential gains even as a vegan with low confirmed normal creatinine levels? Thanks for all the great content. I have to go do something real quick and take a piss. James, if you want to answer the rest of this question, my initial answer, and actually, James, if you wanted to start TJ Jankowski's question after that, I'll be right back with you.
Sure.
My initial answer to this is it's probably more like the 5 to 7% you're losing as a vegan who doesn't take creatine. So I would say you get a pretty decent kick out of creatine if you took it, and I'm not sure how you trade that off with the risk components. So,
Yeah, I tend to agree with Dr. Mike on that one. I think given your situation, it's probably in your best interest to just to use creatine normally, like not some crazy mega doses or anything, just like the kind of standard 5 grams per day. I don't want to put like a percentage on it, like say like this is how much you're losing out on. I would just say I think you would get a tangible performance benefit from using the creatine. So if it's one of those things where you start using it again, you notice like all your hair is falling out, then there you have a reason not to use it. But I don't think that'll be the case. I would say just go ahead and get started. I don't think you should put too much stock into the connection between the creatine supplementation and the creatinine blood work that you're doing. Like Mike said, that could be variable for 1,000 reasons. All right. TJ Jankowski. Evening, gents, or afternoon, or wherever the fuck you read this. That's true. We're all over the place. I just wanted to wait so that James could celebrate Tony Ferguson's win. And whoops. Yeah, I lost a few bucks on that one. Congrats to Justin Gaethje, though. That was a doozy of a fight. I did lose money. Sorry for more biohacking. It's not the biohacking. I think the word is fucking ridiculous, but here I was trying to ask. It's where do they pluck the science from? Is it the rat studies and these people just don't know the real world? I assume you would call these people marketers rather than scientists. Yeah, so sometimes they actually pull it from animal studies, and that's somewhat common. More often than not, they pull it from just like total nonsense. They'll have like unpublished like laboratory data from whatever supplement company that they're using that's not like peer reviewed or anything like that. That's a very common practice for them to do. A lot of times it's neither. It's just some bullshit that they made up and they're straight up just like lying or making shit up. I know that sounds cynical, but that is true. And in the best case, very often they're pulling it from rat and animal studies. And rat and animal studies are useful. They can provide some insight because we share so many of the same mechanisms. But one that's really interesting, and I'm glad Dr. Mike came out at this time, is if you look at the rat research on leucine supplementation, they thought that was going to be the next godsend for a little while because you get rats and they become Hulk rats, right? Unfortunately, that just didn't turn out to be the case in humans, and actually just hitting enough protein per day seems to be just fine. Supplementing with a huge super mega dose of leucine doesn't seem to get you any added benefit that the rats actually saw. So I don't know, man. This is mostly an issue of people just being charlatans. I don't really think that we have to give them much more credit than that. I wish it sounds very cynical on my part, but I think that's the truth.
Is that for Tisha Jankowski's question 1?
Yeah.
Okay, super. Yeah, right on. Okay, that answers the biohacking stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay, next one. Also would like your thoughts on the success over the years of DC training. By the way, DC stands for dog crap. It literally does, not a joke. Very similar to MyoReps, but a bit more regimented with a 2x frequency, heavier loads overall. But the sets, even if you count each full cycle as double, is 6 to 15 sets max per week per muscle group. Very low volume. I wouldn't say that's very low volume. I'd say that's pretty moderate. Moderate low. What was high frequency is only really 2 times a week, which is really good. So how has it been so successful, particularly for advanced guys who I would assume already trained hard, or is it just not as successful? So there's a couple reasons why DC training. So first of all, it's by no means clear how successful it is. So people use shit that's not successful all the time. P90X is used more than DC training by probably 50 times the number of people, but can't say it's more successful. So it is employed. The appeal of DC training is twofold. One, it lets you have a structure, which is really rare in bodybuilding training. And it's the autoregulatory increase in intensity or in loading is actually very simple. It's like if you need a certain rep range, you go up and weight, that's it. And 2, it lets you train to failure every set. People like that because it makes them feel manly and like they're trying. So that's its benefits psychologically, and those are really good benefits. Why is it a pretty decent way of training? 2 times a week frequency is often an increase in frequency from what bros do, which is 1, so they're getting better results. 2, because it goes to failure, it's really unequivocal that you're working hard enough. And 3, a lot of times uses compound movements and it emphasizes full range of motion and emphasizes real legit progression, emphasizes progression in a systematic way. That's really awesome, and that's why I can't hate on DC training, even though I don't think it's optimal. I think something very similar to it is optimal. DC training is one of the only forms of training in which there's a legitimate progression inscripted in the training. It's like when you hit these certain reps, then you go up and weight. And if you can't go up and weight, then you deload and repeat. That's it. Like DC training is right on in my book because of that. So I would say that those are its plus sides.
And I don't think we can emphasize enough how much having an actual structured program really does contribute to having massive results. I mean, how many people just show up to the gym and just do whatever the fuck they feel like doing that day, right? Whereas like being on a program just forces you to follow kind of a set pattern of restrictions, which naturally is just going to cause you to have a very strong progression. So can't say enough good things about that.
Yeah, and DC training does a great thing of establishing a baseline and then trying to match your PRs and break PRs every week. Like, a lot of people, especially in bodybuilding, like with really good genetics, they come in and just sort of show off. And when the going gets tough, they don't try as hard. DC training puts your fucking nose to the paper and says, this is how hard you have to go today, at least this, right? And that's very similar to what we do at RP, which is set a minimum 3 RIR thing and just keep going from there until you hit failure. DC goes to failure right away, but it wants you to eke an extra rep or an extra couple of pounds every time. That's really, really important because a lot of people think they're trying hard. And like, wait a minute, I have to squat what for how many reps? And they do it. They realize they can do it. And then they can do it next week and they do it. And they get, oh my God, I'm getting all these gains. Well, you've never actually progressed before in your training. Whenever the fatigue rose a little bit, you're like, I'm going to go and do this. And this was 5 RIR and way less volume. And if you do that, then you just sort of auto-regulate around being a little bitch all the time.
It sounds very much like the 5-3-1 of hypertrophy training.
Exactly. It absolutely, James, it is exactly that. That is wonderful. DC is the 5-3-1 of hypertrophy training. And for the love of God, 5-3-1 was a revolution because before that, people were doing these programs, which just made no goddamn sense. And there's no progress. They were doing the West Side Super variation. So you could even track if you were getting stronger. Like, well, I did this variant, I PR'd, but I haven't done that in 6 months. So who the fuck knows?
Buffalo Bar good mornings to the seat for 1 rep today. Max effort.
Good morning. That was like the end of West Side. Thank fucking God. All right. Thoughts on rest pause in general. I'm going for a decent time-saving strategy for someone who is looking to eke out as much muscle growth as possible. You just miss out on some volume when massing, which might lead to more growth. Anything I'm missing? So rest pausing works when the local factors are limiting, not systemic factors. So if you rest pause on a squat, A lot of times the only thing that happens is the next couple of reps are just more systemically limited by your lungs and you just get nothing. You're actually to the muscle very far from RR. But if you rest pause a cable bicep curl, that's just more very highly effective reps. So rest pause can be used very well in exercises that are not systemically limiting. On exercises that are systemically limiting, rest pause is a giant waste of time, and you're better off just taking nice long rest breaks and doing higher quality sets.
Yeah, so it's like an intensification technique you can use in conjunction with like your basic straight sets on many things, and then you can add it for supplemental things, towards the end. Not a huge deal.
Rest pause deadlift, so I can see someone try that shit.
Fuck that.
All right. And then he says, finally, thoughts on recent studies that are coming showing superior muscle preservation. I don't think too much showing growth from diets on trainees using up to and over 3 grams per kilogram protein per body weight. Still need more time before we conclude anything. Even longer now, people are devoting their scientific research to stop this bloody globe pandemic. When will we be able to research protein again? Damn it. Yeah, so I actually haven't seen those new studies, so I can't comment on them. I will say new studies, recent studies are bullshit. You have to take the balance of the evidence. A couple more studies can come out later showing the complete opposite. I think my reading of the literature so far is that for individuals that are especially drug-free, especially very lean and have been dieting for a long time, pretty high intakes of protein can be shown to be net catabolic over lower intakes. But for individuals that are none of those things, you actually need very, very little protein to present an anti-catabolic stimulus that's sufficient.
Yeah, and I haven't seen those papers either, so I can't comment on them specifically. But let me just put this out there: it's not new research. Like this comes and goes every couple of years, where it's like, does more protein matter? And it's just this cycle of, I don't know what to call it, but it's the
violence.
Remember Doc Stone used to always give us shit because we'd be like, Doc Stone, what do you think about keto? And he'd be like, everyone asks me this every 5 years, and then it comes back and he's right. It's the same fucking topics that just keep resurfacing. It's like, do you need to eat a shitload of protein? It's like asked and answered, right? It's been done so many times. So I would be surprised if they found something new and interesting. But like Mike said, we go with the gross body of the literature. The current state says, there's probably not a huge benefit there for most people.
Yeah.
Outside of just eating more calories too, that's another. There's always weird shit you have to control for some of these studies where it's just like, okay, well, did they get they're just a giant calorie surplus all from protein, and the other people didn't control calories at all? It gets annoying. Sigh.
All right, let's go to my shit.
YouTube.
Tubes. Get a bit of sharing going. All right, let's see. We got Greg Doucette. We got Jeff Nippard. We got John Meadows. Hopefully John's doing okay.
I gotta call this guy out. So, Tom, I'm assuming you pronounce your name Tom Wen.
Tom Wen. Yeah.
He's commented on combing my hair on at least 2 videos now.
Tom is earning his incel stripes.
Dude,
fast.
Let me just say straight up, I don't own a comb, nor have I combed my hair since I was like 10. When you have a PhD, you get a free pass on crazy hair. I have like Thanos level free pass on my hair.
I believe all humans get a pass on crazy hair on the fact that it's hair. So
I know. And I have thick skin, like it doesn't bother me, but also like, do you want people to show up to your job and make fun of how you look? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, James, get him. Talk that shit. Hey, Tom, Curtis from James
Infinity Gauntlet.
Fuck you. You're gone.
I'm not mad. It's just like you made it on 2. I was going to let it go, but you made it on 2 videos, homie. Come on now.
This is what Tom wanted, because Tom now knows he's got an in. And now Tom is going to use the only tool he has as an incel toolbox. He's going to keep bringing it up. Even after we don't look at it anymore, this is going to be the highlight of what's going on for Tom for a while. Tom, we're just messing with you, buddy.
Come on, man.
His hair does look ridiculous, but so are many.
Who gives a fuck? Not me. Otherwise, I would comb it, but I don't own a comb.
Tom, buy James a comb. It's the least you could do. He can't afford a comb. Clearly.
Oh, somebody else called me out. Steven Turner. James, I hope you didn't put too much money on Tony. I put 25 down, so I lost 25. On the night, I was like 75% on my picks, but the way that the picks worked out, I basically like broke even on money. I think I was like in the red, like a couple bucks, but
oof.
I know.
Shit happens.
Fucking Vegas odds.
All right, so let's get some good questions. This one has to be first. It's a fucking amazing question. this guy, not a real name, can't pronounce. He's got numbers in there.
Was it
Fallen Returns? Yeah, 113 is brilliant. Why are crackheads ripped as fuck? Seriously, how is that even possible? They definitely do not eat healthy or enough. Their sleep is probably the only thing that's within normal, maybe above normal ranges. Maybe. Depends on if they're on the binge side or the downside. I'm pretty sure there isn't a crackhead gym in the sewers. Well, pretty sure, isn't totally sure.
That's where the Ninja Turtles train.
Yeah. If there is, would that be proof of Ninja Turtles? Holy shit, he said himself. Well, crackhead Ninja Turtles. I would say the fact that crackhead the ripped as fuck is down mostly to a great proof of the importance of energy balance. Crackheads are moving all the time, and they don't really eat because crack doesn't exactly make you hungry. So if you're hypocaloric and you move a lot, then you get really fucking lean. That's it. How the fuck are they supposed to get fat?
And just remember, like, looking lean always makes you look deceivingly large, right? That's the optical illusion. So people see somebody who's like really lean, they're like, whoa, that guy's huge. It's like, he's 135 pounds.
Yeah.
Not to shit on people, but like, you know what I mean?
Not to shit on crackheads.
Yeah. It just makes you look bigger than you actually are.
Yeah. All right. Richard R. For the last month, I have had significant outside elbow pain, quote unquote, tennis elbow from lifting. I took 10 days off from all activities. Have used standard rest
ice compression
elevate procedure, RICE. I actually thought it was just putting rice on your elbow, but I was wrong. Prior to first workout back, it was almost pain-free. First, I would feel good. First workout, shoulders, was only a tiny amount of discomfort, but biceps are impossible with normal weight. And I am taking longer rest periods between sets and using an elbow sleeve that has really not helped. That would be the best method of fixing this. Thanks for the help and getting the excellent content. James, what's your best shot at this one?
So the first thing is you got to figure out which movements are exacerbating the pain. Yep. Now, some movements are going to have a little indirect pain, like you might bench press or something, and you're like, it doesn't feel great, but it doesn't really hurt either. But like, for example, you said doing the biceps is like almost impossible. You have to figure out which bicep movements are directly causing that pain and just eliminate them right away, right? So you might find that like doing a barbell curl is awful, but like doing a hammer curl or like a bent over curl or something like that doesn't actually seem to cause you any pain. And if that's the case, you can still train your biceps using those movements. What you also might find is that doing any type of elbow flexion activity, regardless of the grip or dumbbell, barbell, whatever, just is causing excruciating pain. And there's only one way to fix this, homie, and it's terrible. So if you can't do an exercise workaround, the only other option at that point is to let it rest, and you have to give it time to not be inflamed anymore, because if it's inflamed and everything causes it to be more inflamed, it's just going to never heal. It's just going to be a problem that's going to be bothering you forever until you let it go. So you're going to probably want to take a meso off of any direct arm training at that point, see how you're going in the next meso. And what we would say is pick a movement that you can do in a high rep range, pain-free. So for example, you could do like a concentration curl for sets of like maybe 20 to 30 reps. And if you can do that pain-free, then you can add that movement back in the next meso and just do it 1 or 2 days per week and just see how that goes and kind of follow a similar progression from there on. But once you have tendinitis, it doesn't go away until you can do things pain-free.
Yeah. It's that chronic inflammatory cycle. It just re-inflames itself.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, last question for the day. Gustavo Leal Gomez.
Oh, yes, finally. Spicy one.
What would you guys consider an aesthetic physique? And in that same line of thought, do you guys, probably he meant to say think that if there is such a thing as traps too big for aesthetic or something like that? My first answer is it depends on what you mean. James and I could have our own preferences, and those are very important to us. You can also have average preferences. I would say that depends on your goal for aesthetics. Is it to appeal to the average? Is it to appeal to average females? Or is it to appeal to average males? Average males usually prefer bigger traps. Average females do not, but there's huge variation there. So I would say a good movie illustration. Females would probably tend to prefer a Chris Evans a la Captain America physique a little bit more than the Tom Hardy physique, but males almost exclusively prefer the Tom Hardy physique. If you saw Tom Hardy in like Warrior and Captain America in Captain America movies, you'd be like, fuck that Captain America guy. I want Tom Hardy's traps, goddammit. But I think the average female probably prefers the Captain America physique. And then again, there's a lot of non-average females that just want a huge muscle bull, like Tom Hardy. God, I would let Tom Hardy do unspeakable things to me. Sweet Lord.
The girls
Captain America's okay.
The girls on Jersey Shore used to always go for, they would just be like, I want a gorilla. I want a juice head freak.
I want a man with trips.
Jersey Shore reference, honey.
Oh,
my wife was like, what the fuck are you saying?
What are you talking about?
Crystal has seen many episodes of Jersey Shore, and she owes much, there's probably patients at her practice that are like, hey, what's this medical mystery? She's like, honestly, I would know had I not watched so much Jersey Shore. It poisoned my fucking brain and reduced my IQ.
I love Jersey Shore.
James, what do you make of traps?
There is a point of no return on traps, and I finally found it, and it was because the guy had like synthol traps, and it just looked like so
Brazilian synthol traps guy?
Yes. It was like one of those where I was like, no, you've gone too far, my friend. You've gone too far. In terms of aesthetic physique, it's hard to say because everybody has their own personal preferences on those things. I think even like what you think is cool looking might not be the actual aesthetic that you want. So for me, I usually try and get my clients to a point where when they do a double take in the mirror and they go, oh yeah, like I'm feeling pretty good about how I look right now in terms of my like leanness and muscularity. But there's always, that's the thing with like the aesthetic. There's always somebody who's like leaner or more symmetrical or larger than you. So it's kind of one of those things that's like a self-defeating kind of cycle because there's always somebody bigger, better looking, whatever. So usually for me, it's just like, can you get yourself to a point where like you look in the mirror, you give that nod, like, yeah, I feel pretty good about how I look and how much of this I can maintain like 75% of the year without a whole lot of fuss. That's usually what I'm going for.
Yeah. I would say there's some universals of what is an aesthetic physique. People that win the classic physique category at the pro level, national level, there are guys that have physiques that are just awesome, but like, are their physiques better than the guys that win like men's physique with the board shorts? No, it's just different. Like girls would probably look at the board shorts guys and be like, wow, that's a hot body. And look at a classic physique guy to be like, that's a bit much. And then Branch Warren would come out of nowhere. Then again, there's girls and guys that around Branch Warren are uncomfortable because it's so fucking hot. But around a male physique guy, I'd be like, fucking wuss, train weights, So it really just like, it's funny because like I prefer my body to look like a war machine. But if I were into guys, if I was dating a guy, I'd probably go for more like an Eric Helms type of body. I hope Eric hears this. And like if I was going to be dating a guy and he was like a Branch Warren look, I'd be like, that's cool, but I don't know, I'm not into that. You know what I mean? So it really, even like within a single individual, it's different. So I think really just, if you're lean and muscular, there's very many ways of being lean and muscular that are cool looking, and the rest is on you.
I think there's also too, like when you're sizing somebody up like that, I don't mean like sizing them up like to fight, but when you're looking at somebody's physique like that, you also know like the level of like maintenance requirements to maintain that body, right? And so that may or may not like be in line with your lifestyle, and you can immediately note that where you see somebody who looks like a pro bodybuilder and you're like, yeah, that's cool, but man, there's no way I can maintain that regimen. You know what I mean? It's just too much.
Totally. And quality of life. If you're Branch Warren, you probably can't really wipe your own ass all that well.
And same thing goes when you're like sizing up somebody. If you're like in a potential, you want to have a potential relationship. Like if you like, okay, well, this person's is the IFBB pro physique, women's physique. You're like, okay, her life revolves around this. You know what I mean? And if I want to be part of her life, that's what comes with the package. You know what I mean?
James, do you remember, that's a great point. Do you remember John Romano, who was an editor for Muscular Development? I don't know if he is.
I used to read MD, but I don't remember that.
MD, yeah. So he was the chief editor at one point. He wrote a great article in MD. MD was a great fucking magazine. It was like hardcore before hardcore.
Yeah.
He wrote an article about like it was called "So You Want to Date a Figure Girl," and this like one of his training partners like, man, I think I'm in love with her. He's like, you're not in love with her. You're in fuck with her. There's a difference. And he's like, if you want to date a figure girl, this is what you expect. And it was a pretty obviously the article was a little bit like tongue in cheek, had a lot of truth to it. And clearly not all figure girls like this, but he's like, get ready to hold her hair while she throws up her dinner because she has a fucking eating disorder, because tons of these girls do. Get ready for her to only give a shit about what she looks like, and so on down the line. And he's like, if you're into that, that's great, but you got to understand, you're not just getting the look, you're getting a whole package. And it was like, tons of figure girls out there aren't insane people, are not struggling with a tons of disorders, 2 groups, by the way. But some of them are. And that's just something, like if you look at a guy who's like 300 pounds shredded, like he doesn't just get there just by accident. That's a lifestyle. If you're into that lifestyle and you're a girl or you're a guy and you want to date someone like that, then you just know what you're getting. But funny enough, like my wife and I have talked about this before. She has like acquaintances in her past which like started dating a person who had a certain hobby, any kind. Sometimes it's a physical fitness hobby. Sometimes it's another hobby. And then like when they get married and start to think about children, they're like, you have to stop your hobby. It's like, good fucking God, did you know you were getting yourself into? Like when her and I started dating, she was like, I'm never going to quit lifting weights to make time for you. And I'm never going to quit being a doctor because you feel lonely. I'm like, that's the hottest thing I've ever heard in my life. But not everyone thinks that's hot. You know, some people are like, you need to stop this career bullshit and be with me. So, you know, when you're looking for how you want to look, think about how much time you want to spend looking like that and maintaining it. And also that if you're looking for a certain look on a significant other, understand that, you know, you're getting some other stuff with that look. And a lot of times people are like, oh, I love that he looks like this. But I've literally heard this. Like people are like, I love that he looks like that, but I hate all the time he spends in the gym. Like, what the fuck, are you fucking retarded? Like, yeah, like, how do you think that shit works? So
it's the same way when you size someone up and it's fucking Jabba the Hutt, right? You know, it's like probably not going to be a good match. Nani?
But if you like to eat tasty food, they're probably 100% down with that shit.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Dude, Woot had a deal the other day. It was like an archetype blueprint, but it was Jabba the Hutt. So it was like Jabba the Hutt in like a blueprint form. I was like, I have to get
That's
this.
so sweet.
It's too amazing.
He was initially designed like that. Dude, I'll say this off camera. We got to wrap it up.
Okay, we'll wrap it up for now. Folks, great job. Good questions as always. If you want to have your questions for sure answered, you make sure you join up with RP Plus. I think it's free till July.
Yep.
Free to July. So if you want your questions answered, sign up for RP Plus. And then there's a link in the forum. If you go to the forum, miscellaneous, there's a thread that's like weekly webinar with Mike and James, something to the tune of that. You can drop your questions in there. If you're not an RP Plus member, you can toss them up on the YouTube comments. We may or may not read them, but if they're good, we'll usually grab them. And thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you guys engaging with us.
Peace.